Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Sprague. I'm the president of the Hamilton City Schools Board of Education. And on behalf of the board, I am honored to welcome all of you to the dedication of the Thomas A. Alf Media Center. At this time, I'd like to recognize our board members, Pastor Shaquilla Matthews, Mag Baker, Dave Davidson, and Steve Isgro. I'd also like to recognize past president of the board, Rob Weigel. And I'd like to recognize Tom Alf's family. Would you guys stand so everybody can see you? Please stand. I would like to thank Tim Hoskins of Triangle Sign Company for working diligently to overcome some major supply chain issues to make sure we have the plaque here tonight. We've had some issues. I also want to thank you to, a big thank you to Jeff Kilby, our Executive Director of Business and Operations in our Maintenance Department for their work in making sure today is possible. Finally, a thank you to our Superintendent, Mr. Mike Holbrook, and Hamilton High School Principal John Zeri for their work in making today possible too. Since Tom's passing on November 13th, 2019, the school board has discussed how to honor Tom and his legacy. Dedicating the Hamilton High Media Center in his name is an appropriate way to do so. Unfortunately, COVID-19, and you've probably all heard that, has severely delayed this dedication, so I'm overjoyed that the day has finally arrived. I've not run across a list that outlines the criteria for a dedication. However, I think all of us would agree that Tom Alf would check off every box on that list. Born and raised in Hamilton, his roots were here, so we can check that imaginary box. Lived and worked in Hamilton as a teacher and later as an administrator. Let's check that box. Served his community by participating on a number of local boards, including the Hamilton Board of Education. We can check that box. Married Debbie, a Hamilton educator. That's a good box to check off. Thank you, Deb. Made an incredible positive impact on our schools, our students, and our community. He changed lives. That would be a huge check mark on that list. There is no doubt that Tom deserves the special honor for the impact he made on all of us. For me, my memory of Tom stretches way back to the 1980s, when I started here as a teacher. In either 1992 or 1993, I actually interviewed with him while he was principal at Garfield Middle School. I interviewed for the assistant principal position. He didn't give it to me. Thank goodness. However, I got to know Tom better when I started dating a teacher in his building. When I married Melissa Sizemore in 1994, he and his family attended the wedding. And in 1998, he delivered the eulogy at her funeral. Later, when Tom was the Director of Human Resources, I worked with him as administrator in the district. And after we had both retired, crazy it was, we were hired as substitute administrators working at Bridgeport Elementary, where we worked together on discipline issues. It was great working closely with Tom, and believe me, we had some very challenging days, but we shared a lot of laughs. Then in 2017, when he was a board member, he encouraged me to run for a seat on the board. Funny story about Tom. We all know how he was obsessed with walking and preparing for his trek down to see the Reds. I lived about a mile from his house on Hermé, and I felt like every time I walked out of the house, because I'd be working in the yard, Tom would stop by and talk, and talk, and talk. And we'd talk about families, we'd talk about life, and it always ended up with encouraging me to be on the board, or to run for the board. It was almost like he waited around the corner for me to come out, and then he'd come running over. And sometimes I wonder how much walking he actually was able to do, because he seemed to know everybody in town. And by the way, am I the only one that thinks he had a superpower of remembering everybody's name, where they lived, and all their relatives, back 3-4 generations? It was wild. In any case, I was elected to the board, and my first night on the board, he gave me this. I had the honor of serving with Tom on the school board for 2, let's just say, very interesting years before his passing in 2019. As we all know, Tom's dedication to Hamilton schools and his heart and compassion for others cannot be underestimated. Over the next few minutes, we have a number of people who would like to share their thoughts about Tom. And following the short speeches, we'll unveil the plaque in his memory. One person who wishes that she could be with us with us today is Janet Baker. Janet, as many of you know, was Hamilton School Superintendent for many, many years and worked closely with Tom. Janet's out of town and sends her greetings to all of you, and she asked me to share her thoughts with you. From Janet. I'm honored to be invited to share a few memories about my colleague and friend, Tom Alf. As I watched the funeral of Queen Elizabeth, 2 phrases stood out that reminded me of Tom. The Queen celebrated a great life, a well-lived life. Tom is being celebrated today for his well-lived life. She was a queen like no other, and Tom was definitely one of a kind and an educator like no other. I first met Tom over 50 years ago when I was a new principal at George Washington Junior High. Tom came to GW from Roosevelt and saw that I could use his help. He came to me and volunteered to do, seriously, bus duty and before and after school supervision. That was like no other, in that he saw a need and he filled it. He helped maintain good discipline, formed caring relationships with the students, and reassured parents that their children were safe. Later, when I became superintendent, I needed an accomplished high school principal, one who had the ability to run a large urban high school. Tom fit the bill perfectly. One of the highlights of his high school tenure was bringing an ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, program to our school. Not only did the program become award-winning, but also it changed the lives of many of our students. Fast forward. Again, I need an assistant superintendent for human resources, someone to recruit, hire, and train educators. Who better than Tom Alf, who was known and respected for having great people skills and building relationships. It was then that I had the opportunity to work with Tom on a daily basis. The consistency of his work ethic, care and concern for others, and excelling in whatever position he was assigned to set him apart like no other. In a life well lived, success is often measured by the impact you have on others. That was definitely true of Tom. Thousands of students, families, friends, and community members remember him as a person who made an important difference in their lives, and his legacy lives on. On a personal level, Tom was a devoted and loving husband, father, and grandfather. I can still remember his face lighting up when he talked about them and their accomplishments. I'd like to close my remarks by sharing 3 memories of Tom. Tom was well known for always going above and beyond. I was talking to him about how I wanted to have a Santa for my 2 young sons, but had waited too long to find someone. You guessed it. On Christmas Eve, the doorbell rang, and Santa Tom was there with his bag of gifts. A picture of my boy sitting on Santa's knees is still one of my special memories and treasures. As Tom and I worked together for many years, we became friends in addition to colleagues. I happened to mention that my favorite flowers were daisies and that they had been in my wedding bouquet. Year after year on my birthday, beautiful daisy arrangements arrived at my home with a thoughtful and caring note. My final story was after I retired. I was sitting in the dining hall at Westover having lunch with my mom, who had dementia. Tom had worked with my mom in one of the schools, and he came over to us and lovingly gave her a big hug and pulled up a chair to see how I was doing as a caretaker. He always puts the needs of others before his own. 50 years is a long time to know someone, and I want to thank Tom for living a well-lived life and being an educator, but more importantly, a human being like none other. This dedication today will serve as a reminder to all of us and to future generations of the type of person we should all aspire to be. Rest in peace, my friend, Janet Baker. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mike Holbrook, the superintendent of the Hamilton Schools.
Thank you, President Sprague. Good afternoon, and I'm very delighted to welcome all of you to Hamilton High School. We're here today to rename the Hamilton High School Media Center, but more importantly, we're here to honor a man. The naming of the Thomas A. Alf Media Center at Hamilton High School is indeed a high tribute, but the memory of Tom lives not simply in a structure, but in his enduring spirit. The spirit of dedication to education of the students of Hamilton City Schools, and also the entire Hamilton community. By honoring Tom in this way, we recognize the indelible impact he's had on the district and community. Tom was always a champion of students, and the immense influence Tom had as a teacher, building administrator, assistant superintendent, and school board member has shaped the direction of education in Hamilton for years to come. I had the opportunity to work with Tom for a very short period of time, but during that time, I quickly came to appreciate his experience, guidance, and years of service. Tom wasn't one to provide guidance through theory, but instead one of his greatest values was his vast experiences. You see, Tom was in the arena. He was in the arena his entire life. And his experience and guidance often remind me that it's through followership, not leadership, that great things are achieved. I have a quote in my office, and I also was given a book this summer to read on Teddy Roosevelt. And many times when I look at that quote, there's memories of Tom that I'm reminded of, and I want to spend a second with that quote. Roosevelt stated, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how a strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, blood, and sweat, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end triumph of high achievement, and who at worst he fails while daringly great. So his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who never know defeat or victory." During my time with Tom, I had the pleasure of working with one of the most dedicated and devoted individuals to the city of Hamilton in the education of students. He was marred by the dust, by the blood, and by the sweat. He was in the arena, and he kept making a difference. He strived with great enthusiasm towards a common goal of making Hamilton a better place, and he certainly knows the triumph of achievement, as Hamilton is a better school district and a community due to his efforts and contributions. As we honor Tom with the naming of the Hamilton High School Media Center, I'm comforted in knowing that he's looking down on us and realizing the lasting triumph of achievement he has made on this district and community. At this time, I want to introduce Marnie Durham, Assistant Superintendent for Butler Tech.
Hello, everyone. So I'd like to start this dedication by saying many people find it beneficial to drop names when introducing themselves to gain clout with others. I name dropped that I was the first teacher Tom Alf ever hired, and he is a longtime friend and mentor. This gets me in the door as someone that may be able to be trusted. What I don't share often is that he fired me that same week. Fresh out of college in 1992, and he hired me to be an intervention specialist at Garfield Junior High. A few days later, he called to say that he was unaware that a tenured teacher in the district was being moved to that position, so I did not have a job. But his beautiful wife was an elementary principal, and I could interview for a job opening that she had posted. My first thought was, well, I don't like little people. But I really needed a job. Well, I got the job, fell in love with Debbie, and actually melted when I saw my first class of students come in and admire my paper flower cutouts. 2 weeks later, Tom calls to tell me the teacher in my original position wants out and asked if I wanted in. I said yes, but hesitated because a tenured teacher wants out and a newbie is supposed to do any better. He said, we'll figure it out. So I made the switch to becoming a Griffin. He was ecstatic that I took the challenge of cheerleading coach, which became a topic of our greatest stories, teaching HASP and home instruction. Tom nor I knew that I was in the market for a father figure with confidence, a little bit of Clark Griswold in him, and compassion, and here he was. The students knew that I was dark green in my experience and had fun with it. One day I found myself in the hallway looking for a savior. God knew I was too big of a project for Tom to handle alone, so he sent in backup in the form of Ed Tyndum, serving as hall monitor. He watched my eyes swell with tears as I shared the comments of my beloved students, Stacy Bankston and Michael McDougall from 1992, I still remember. He said this, you got a few choices. Send them to the office, quit, or go back in. I prefer you choose not to look like you can't handle them because I know you can. I'll go in there and settle them down and you make your decision. I went back into class and a few days later, Tom came to tell me Ed shared my experience and was proud of me. Anything less than a strong leader would have made me feel weak. For that, 30 years later in my educational journey in a leadership position is why I'm here today, telling you why Tom Alf was an extraordinary leader. Not only that, but I had the pleasure of witnessing his parenting skills to one of my good friends, Sarah. And coincidentally, watched him and Debbie navigate the birth of our beloved Katie the same year. Katie with her tenacity and Sarah with her grit and fashionista abilities. Then, of course, came big shoes to fill, and you did, Robert, Ella the Great, and Helen on wheels. I just wanted to be part of the goodness this family exuded into this world. The walk. I was unable to join the Reds walk, but had to find a way to show him that I thought he was amazing. I was the first person to the door when Debbie said, he's actually not up yet. I was able to see him and his warrior friends, many of you in this room, see them off as they embarked on what we all know was a newsworthy adventure. Why? Because he's Tom Alf, and he sets the bar high, so we step up our game. He was magic when it came to getting a team together. Whether planning reunions with his friends or leading a building, this came in handy when he landed in the Village. When I was hired at New Miami, I started every conversation with, you know I know Tom Alf, and I'm the first teacher he ever hired, and he's a good friend, which was the key opener. Tom called with excitement about how I was joining such a special community and talked for hours about how I could help the students. It was there that I met John Graff. During our time together, he went to Butler Tech, and like Tom, I knew he was a solid leader. I followed John to Butler Tech and was in charge of hiring others as HR director. When the School of the Arts was going through a tough time in need of a principal, someone at the table said, we need a leader that ultimately can just let kids know that they are loved. It was like the record had been scratched, and I yelled, I got him. Tom Alf is the answer. Let me see if he's available. Of course, he made himself available and became the principal of the School of the Arts. During his time there, we lost a student to a car accident, and Tom led the team to grieve as a family. Tom had only been the principal for a few months when graduation came about for all 600 Butler Tech students at Cintas. Students cheers as they hear their principal's name called. Then, only 75 seniors strong out of 600, came the introduction of Tom Alf. The kids jumped up, screamed, paid homage like they had just won the Super Bowl for the man that showed them the love. My entire team on stage turned to look at me in confusion, and I said, I told you he's magic. After that, Tom became the Hamilton Butler Tech Board of Education representative. Once again, I got to tell this story about this legendary man. I hugged him as he left our meeting for surgery in a few days, and when his seat was empty the following board meeting, our president, Michael Birding, read this poem, I Am Standing Upon the Seashore, by Henry Van Dyke, and I'd like to share some opening verses. I'm standing upon the seashore, a ship at my side, spreads her white sails to the moving breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until, at length, she hangs like a speck of white cloud, just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, there, she is gone. Gone where? Gone from sight, that is all. She is just as large in mast, hull, and spar as she was when she left my side. And she is just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. Tom's diminished size is in us, in our hearts. But overall, his impact is not diminished at all. Look at this room filled of admirers. When I was in California with our board president, Michael, he pulled me in a store and showed me this picture of a ship that was created to embody the Henry Van Dyke poem that he read about Tom. We loved on him for a while, and then we moved on. On our flight home, Michael handed me this picture. I had it framed with my last picture of Tom and I in Butler Tech gear. It hangs in my office as a reminder to me of the greatest of all time. This media center holds the works of Henry Van Dyke. I want to thank you for finding me his books in here. I hope students will hear the stories of Tom Alf as they ask why this sacred place of learning is named after him. For a long time, I felt like I was special because I was obviously Tom's favorite. Over time, I realized I wasn't so special. He was, because he made everyone feel like they were his favorite. Thank you to the Alf family for letting me do this and honoring Tom. Carpe diem to all of you. And I will joyfully ask Sarah to come on up as our next speaker. So much love to you.
I should know by this point in my career, you don't follow that one, you get ahead of her. So thanks, Lauren, for that. So first, as I look around this room, I see my entire childhood and professional career over the timeline. So a sincere thank you from our family to each of you for joining us today. During the ceremony, we've heard of my amazing father's impact on our community and what he meant to so many of us. I'd like to take a moment, though, to share what Hamilton meant to him. But first, let me set the stage. So during the 2-week roller coaster that so many of you followed with us and his special group of his favorite people of 154 people that I had to manage, you're welcome that was not a group text thread, by the way. Mom and I joyfully kind of had opportunities to prove that what we were being told by the neurology team was in fact incorrect. They had said that Dad could no longer see or hear. So I'm going to walk you through those 3 occasions. The first was one day when Dad and I were alone in his cardiac ICU room. He was having a very restless and unstable day. He couldn't have any pain meds due to neurological testing that they needed to do. So all his room had an all-glass front. He was the sickest patient in the hospital, so we had a lovely team of nurses that were staring in, if not in his room, at all times. And his vitals machines were dinging. All the nurses are looking in and visualize, this is what they see. Me climbing up, straddling on Dad's bed, doing the following. I climbed up, my voice slowly started to bring his vitals down. So they're outside the glass coaching me to keep going. So I climb up on his bed and I'm in his ear and I start talking very loudly because they said if he could hear, it wasn't very easily. So I'm basically screaming, straddling his bed, just so you have a good visual here. And I start telling him, I'm talking to him randomly about sports and the upcoming election in which he and Pastor Shack, he was reelected and you're elected, all the things. And I start telling him the story that he and my mom have told me on numerous occasions about the day I was born. Apparently, I don't remember this, apparently on that day, Dad was on the phone calling everyone he knew to proudly announce he had a daughter. Apparently they thought I was going to be a son back in the day when they went by heartbeat. Can't imagine him calling everyone he knew on the Rolodex, Pastor Shack. Legend has it that Dad's voice was the only thing that stopped me from crying. During my storytelling of that day to Dad in his ICU room, his eyes opened, he locked eyes with me, and he shed a single tear. All of his vitals returned to normal. The nurses are literally like, keep going. I'm like, I can tell the story again. It wasn't that long. So a second instance when I knew that Dad was still in there was when my mom was at his bedside. She was doting over him, combing over his smooth, blackish gray hair, and she goes, "Hey there, big boy, what's your name?" Dad replied, "Tom Alf." My mom's flirting still had the power to bring him from an unconscious state after all these years. Mom, side note, this is what happens when you ask me to be the spokeswoman for the family. The third occasion was equally profound for me. It was about each and every one of you in this room and in this community. We were preparing to transport Dad on the 11th of November from Christ Hospital back here to Hospice of Hamilton. We had been told to say our goodbyes in case Dad did not survive that rough ride. He was agitated and very, very restless, so Mom and I each took a turn, once again, getting up near his face, telling him that we loved him, etc. I ended my little spiel with, "Dad, we are taking you to hospice. We're taking you home. You're going to Hamilton." His entire body once again relaxed, all of his vitals stabilized. You see, Hamilton was his identity. His awesome campaign manager for his unopposed 2 runnings for school board, we came up with the hashtag, thank you village people in the crowd, you were part of this voting, Hamilton Proud, on the play of Hamilton Proud. He was proudly raised, as Lauren mentioned, here. He raised us, Katie and I here, joyfully served as an educator for 50 years in this community. He unwaveringly walked the town 5 miles a day, as we all saw, and called Mom and I to make sure he was okay. He happily dined and shopped to support local businesses. Of course, this largely included French fry runs for Katie at all hours of the day and night. He religiously planned social gatherings to generally spend time with people. He faithfully served and represented his hometown of Hamilton until his last day on earth. So thank you for partaking and being the collective joy and purpose of my dad's life. On behalf of our family, including my mom, Debbie, sister, Katie, aunts, Mary Jo and Lucy, his favorite son-in-law and only, Robert, and granddaughters, Ella and Helen, as well as our extended family. Thank you for this generous day and our ultimate tribute for our best guy. You know, they always say you save the best for last. We have one more speech. At this time, I would love to introduce my oldest daughter, Ella Ann Burke. Wrong kid.
This library will be named after a great man who you knew was Tom Alf, but to me, he was my grandpa. Unfortunately, he went to heaven when I was a kindergartner. But I will never forget how special he was. He was cool. How cool it is that he got to be my substitute principal when I was in preschool and kindergarten. I love hearing stories about him. I hear some of you in the audience do a really good impression that I need to see. Grandpa loved laughing at himself too. Let's see, where should I start? Oh, wait, yes, he's driving. One time he ran into the brick wall in my front yard. He was attempting to take my Aunt Lucy and my cousin Julie to the airport. My house is in the woods, and let's just say we're missing a few trees there too. Thanks to him, also my mom says that the new Miami crew learned to pray as a group thanks to being a passenger in Grandpa's care on the way to many Reds games, and he always drove at all hours of the day and the night to get my Aunt Katie food from McDonald's. Let's just say sometimes half the fries were missing. Right, Katie? I asked my mom why I don't have any memories of ever riding with him. It's because she only let it happen once, and it was literally across Main Street of all everywhere we went, including Disney World. I have all of you knew who he was too. Turned out that case everywhere he went, including Disney World. I have heard many people, including my mom and dad, tell me that Grandpa had a knack for getting up and deliver speech without even writing a word down. I am told that these speeches tend to be a little long. On that note, even though I look just like him and my mom, we do not get the trait from him. Thank goodness. So anyway, I'm happy that all of you came today to see this library be named after one of the greatest men on earth. Thank you for celebrating him with my family today.
Wow. Great job, guys. Boof. At this time, I think we have our three amigos up there, and they're going to unveil the plaque. So on the count of three. Ready? 1, 2, 3. There you go. Thank you again for coming tonight. This is fabulous, and it's a tribute to Tom and what he's meant to our community. Please spend some time talking, reminiscing, and we do have some snacks over here. Please feel free to partake. But again, thank you for coming.